among these orders, one of the things Joe Biden did is he shut down new energy exploration on federal land. Just shut it down, again, with a stroke of a pen. And by the way, you know who that helps? That helps Russia, that helps Iran, that helps Venezuela. That means America relies more on Middle East oil, sending billions of dollars to nations that are not our friends, and it pollutes the environment worse. The irony of what they're doing is there will be worse pollution. You know, something that neither Joe Biden nor John Kerry ever address? Maria, do you know what nation last year had the single greatest total carbon reduction of any nation on the face of the earth? The answer, of course, is the United States. Yes. Yeah. And what they're doing is slowing that down. They're saying, let's not rely on lesser producing, more efficient, job-creating American energy. Instead, let's go back to being energy dependent on foreign nations. This is hurting a lot of jobs, and it's undermining the security of our country. You know, last week, I sat outside the Capitol. I listened to Joe Biden give his inauguration speech. I thought it was a good speech. I was glad to see him make an appeal towards unity. I think all of us would like to see greater national unity at this time when we have so much division, so much anger and hatred pulling this country apart. But then he left giving that speech, and he returned to the Oval Office, and literally within minutes began signing these executive orders that were radical and extreme. As you noted, he signed an order canceling the Keystone Pipeline. 11,000 jobs with a stroke of a pen he made go away. 8,000 of those are union jobs. And at the same time, he rejoined the Paris climate deal, which threatens to destroy thousands of high-paying jobs across this country. And the answer, I've asked multiple Biden nominees what they would say to the union workers who just lost their jobs because Joe Biden decided they didn't deserve a job. And essentially, nominee after nominee after nominee has said, well, tough luck. You know, John Kerry in that same news conference you put up, he said, well, they need to learn to make better choices. What an arrogant, out-of-touch statement for a centimillionaire to say, you know, you little people, you know, I don't like the choices you're making, and so your jobs go away. That blue-collar workers, that union members, that men and women with calluses on their hands, they've made the wrong choices, in John Kerry's words. Well, that is not a unifying message. It's not doing the job we should be doing, fighting for working men and women in this country.
The first thing they do is look to where to cut the fat. Where am I going to cut back because I'm facing new fees? I'm facing new regulatory hurdles. Are you expecting business to look at these new regulations around climate and say, well, I'm going to have to cut here. I'm going to have to cut there. And we know that the oil industry is not just one segment. There's a lot of indirect exposure throughout the economy and business that gets touched by this.
Well, that's exactly right. And, you know, the nobility of the elitist left is they show how noble they are when they're willing to give away your job. Notice it's never their jobs they're giving away. It's never their Silicon Valley billionaire supporters. It's never Wall Street. It's never Hollywood. It's they're willing to give away someone else's job. And look,
this is also requiring cooperation with China. Look, we talk about China a lot on this program. We have all week. But John Kerry said, cooperation with China is the key to progress on climate change. And that climate is the #1 issue between the U.S. and China, as if China has not broken promise after promise across the world.
Well, Maria, that's right. And there is a hopeless naivete among the Biden administration. You know, one of the really disturbing patterns that we've seen come out in this past week with Biden nominee after Biden nominee is a warm embrace of China. That you want to talk about one of the most dramatic shifts the next 4 years are going to entail is the Biden administration crawling into bed with China. You know, I asked multiple Biden nominees, for example, whether they would maintain Huawei on the entities list because Huawei is a global espionage company masquerading as a telecom company. Not a single one of the Biden nominees was willing to commit to keep Huawei on that list. And I'll tell you today in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, we had the confirmation hearing for Biden's nominee to be ambassador to the United Nations. She disclosed that just a little over a year ago, in October of 2019, she gave a paid speech before a Confucius Institute. Now, Confucius Institutes, as you know, are paid for by the Chinese Communist Party, paid for by the Chinese government. They engage in espionage and propaganda. I authored bipartisan legislation in the Senate that passed into law that has shut down dozens of Confucius Institutes. Well, Biden's nominee to be UN ambassador just over a year ago gave a paid speech there praising China and saying America needs to be more like China. This is dangerous that this administration, as a policy decision, is embracing and getting into bed with China.
Yeah, I'm waiting for President Biden to discuss China's role in the coronavirus. We haven't heard a peep about that. He has not acknowledged China's behavior in terms of allowing this virus to escape its borders and then using the virus as a way to make moves across the world, invade India, go into Hong Kong with new rules, bully everybody in the South China Sea. We haven't heard anything about China's role in the coronavirus from Joe Biden yet.
You know, you look at the nominees Joe Biden is putting forward, they have a disturbing pattern of being apologists for the Chinese Communist Party. You look at Mayorkas, who was nominated to be the head of the Department of Homeland Security. When he was in DHS before, he personally spearheaded getting visas for big Democratic donors at the behest of Hillary Clinton's brother, including senior executives in Huawei, the Chinese espionage company. These are the people they're putting forward, are people who, as a policy matter, believe that America should embrace warmly communist China. Joe Biden, one of the orders he signed, says you can't refer to the COVID-19 virus as the China virus or the Wuhan virus because, God forbid, we acknowledge where it came from and which country spent months silencing, oppressing, imprisoning the doctors trying to stop the spread of this virus. And the Chinese Communist government bears direct responsibility for the hundreds of thousands of lives that have been lost because of COVID-19. And the Biden administration, it seems virtually none of them are willing to actually say that out loud.
Yeah, I want to ask you about other policies, but while we're here, last night on this program, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo joined me, and he had a word to say about just that. Listen to Mike Pompeo last night here.
I've called it the Wuhan virus almost since its inception. It began in Wuhan. It is, in fact, a virus that came from that place. We know that the Chinese Communist Party covered that up. We know that they disappeared doctors and journalists who wanted to write about it were told they couldn't. I hope, and I'm counting on this next administration to do what the American people demand of them and continue to confront the Chinese Communist Party.
And as you say, we are no longer allowed to use the term China virus as the stomping on free speech continues drip by drip, Senator. By the way, Google CEO, the former CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt. Okay, I mean, you can't get worse than this. He warned today that China is surging to overtake the United States in critical areas. This from the former head of the company that walked away from the Pentagon and the Project Maven, remember that, so that it could go set up its AI office in Beijing. Real quick on that, I want to get to other issues before you go.
Well, look, China poses the single greatest geopolitical threat to the United States over the next century, and we need serious, clear-eyed, focused policymakers. Today, when I was questioning Biden's nominee to be UN ambassador, I asked her a simple question, whether China had committed a genocide, as the U.S. State Department determined, targeted at the Uyghurs, 1 million people in concentration camps. She refused even to answer that straightforward question. And I don't know where the decision has been made, if it's Joe Biden directly or simply everyone who surrounds him, but there is now a growing pattern of refusing to confront and apologizing for the oppression, the malign activities, and the anti-American influence of the Chinese Communist Party.
Senator, assess the situation in terms of this incredible sweep of executive orders, the most aggressive we've seen. Today, they canceled contracts with prisons. What is that going to mean for the streets and for prisoners on streets? And then there's this, something you predicted a long time ago. There is already a bill to make D.C. the 51st state. Yep. end the filibuster. Tell us what this means for the American people and what other policies you've seen so far that should worry the American people.
Well, sure. A big open question is whether the Democrats are going to have the votes to end the filibuster. It will take all 50 Democrats agreeing to break the rules and blow the Senate rules up to end the filibuster. Right now, there are two Democrats who are saying they will oppose that, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. If they actually hold the line, that will be a big benefit for the country. Now, I got to admit, if past is prologue, Chuck Schumer has been very good at putting the thumb screws to Democrats, and I actually wonder if they're literal thumb screws at times, because they have had a party discipline that is remarkable. So I hope Joe and Kyrsten can hold the line. If they do, the worst legislative excesses that the Democrats want to pass won't pass into law. So if the Democrats don't have the votes to end the filibuster, D.C. won't become a state. Why do Democrats want D.C. to become a state? Because they want 2 more Democratic senators. Likewise, if the Democrats don't have the votes to end the filibuster, they will not succeed with their radical plan to pack the U.S. Supreme Court, to add 4 new left-wing activist justices to the court, to take it from 9 justices to 13, which would profoundly undermine our fundamental rights of free speech, religious liberty, the Second Amendment. That being said, even if they don't end the filibuster, we're going to see a lot of harmful policies the next 2 and 4 years. We're going to see executive actions. We're going to see regulatory actions. We're going to see national security actions. And they're going to take up what's called budget reconciliation, which is a procedural mechanism to get around the filibuster, which means we are headed for a massive tax increase. They can do that with just Democratic votes. I don't think they're just going to repeal the 2017 tax cut. They are going to raise the taxes on every working American. That's coming. And I'll tell you, I'm committed to doing everything I can in the Senate to lead the fight to stop policies that hurt jobs and that take away our freedoms.
Well, if those taxes are going that high, you could expect a recession on the way as well. Yeah. Clearly, money is mobile, and people will take that money and take it to where it's treated best. I know you've got thoughts on immigration. We're going to Texas next up. Senator, it's great to see you tonight. Thank you, sir.
I've for a long time believed that the single greatest geopolitical threat facing the United States is China, and the communist government in China is a profoundly malign influence. I am also growing increasingly concerned over the last 2 weeks by a pattern among Biden administration nominees of consistently moving towards and embracing the Chinese Communist Party. It became even worse this morning in an article that broke in the Washington Post that described a speech you gave just a little over a year ago in October of 2019 to a Confucius Institute. Confucius Institutes are paid for by the Chinese Communist government. We have had repeated problems of espionage and propaganda. That's why the Chinese Communist government funds Confucius Institutes. Congress has passed bipartisan legislation cracking down on Confucius Institutes, legislation I authored that passed Congress with overwhelming bipartisan support. At the same time that the United States Congress and the United States government is acting to combat the spying, the espionage, the propaganda coming from Confucius Institutes, run and controlled by the Chinese Communist government, according to the Washington Post, you were apparently going to a Confucius Institute, giving a paid speech, and praising China.
What I saw in terms of what the Confucius Institute was doing in Georgia, I saw them engaging in poor black communities with the poorest of people. It is the same thing that I've seen in Africa, and I was appalled by it. And I've expressed my strong regret for having given that particular speech at Savannah University. And if I had it to do all over again, I would not have accepted.
So you've said you were horrified by seeing firsthand what the Confucius Institute was doing. Did you keep the money?
I can tell you what I did with the money.
So you did keep the money, though? You didn't give it back?
I did. I did not give it back. It was not from the Confucius Institute. It was from Savannah State University.
Now, you also described, you said you've spoken out against China's abusive practices. perhaps you have elsewhere, but I can tell you I'm holding the speech you gave at the Confucius Institute, and I can't find a single word of criticism in this speech. This speech is cheerleading for the Chinese Communist Party. You praise the Belt and Road Initiative. You praise their entrapping developing countries in debt bondage. And you say the United States should follow China's model. Is it the role of America's UN ambassador to be cheering on the Chinese Communist Party at the expense of the developing world and at the expense of America?
Senator, it was not my intention, nor do I think that I cheered on the Chinese Communist Party. What I recommended in that speech is that Africans need to open their eyes on how they deal with the Chinese. And I would like to see the United States government do more in Africa to compete with the...
My final question, did you have even a word of criticism about the Chinese Communist Party, about its murders, about its tortures, about its concentration camps, about its genocide? Did you have even a word of criticism in the speech you gave at the Confucius Institute?